The merciless sun scorched the Colorado plains, transforming the once fertile land into a wasteland of cracked earth and withered grass. William Hayes stood motionless on his weathered porch, his calloused hand shielding tired eyes as he surveyed the desolation that had become his ranch. 3 months without rain had turned his dream into a nightmare of dust and dying cattle. His modest farmhouse groaned under the relentless heat, its wooden boards bleached gray by countless storms and seasons of neglect. The barn sagged like a broken promise, its roof patched with whatever materials William could salvage. In the distance, his remaining cattle huddled in whatever shade they could find, their ribs showing through dull coats. William's fingers tightened around the letter that had become his lifeline, a response from the matrimonial agency in Denver. 6 weeks ago, desperation had driven him to write those painful words, swallowing his pride with each sentence. He had been brutally honest. He needed a practical woman. Not young, not beautiful, just someone strong enough to share the burden of keeping his land alive. Beauty had already broken his heart once. His beloved Sarah had been the prettiest girl in 3 counties. With raven hair and eyes like morning sky, she had loved him fiercely until consumption took her 2 winters past, leaving him hollow and afraid to feel again. He had buried his heart with her, vowing never to risk such pain. But loneliness had proven as deadly as the drought. The silence had grown so thick he sometimes spoke aloud to his horses just to hear a human voice. Neighbors had stopped visiting, tired of his grief and bitterness. The preacher's wife had tried bringing eligible women around, but William had turned them all away, his heart sealed tight as a locked vault. Now, desperation had forced his hand. The bank had already extended his loan twice. Without help, he would lose everything his father had built, everything Sarah had loved, so he had written that letter, requesting a plain woman of good character who understood hard work and harder times. The reply had come yesterday. Bride arriving Friday afternoon train. Cedar Junction Station. Name: Catherine Morgan. Today was Friday. In 3 hours, his carefully ordered world would change forever. And William Hayes wasn't sure if he was ready for salvation or simply trading one form of loneliness for another. William hitched his strongest horses to the wagon with hands that trembled slightly despite his efforts to remain calm. The clean white shirt felt foreign against his skin. He hadn't worn anything but work clothes since Sarah's funeral. The 20-mile journey to Cedar Junction would give him time to prepare for whatever awaited, though he suspected no amount of preparation would be enough. The dusty road stretched endlessly before him, flanked by dead grass and skeletal remains of what had once been proud oak trees. Other ranchers he passed nodded grimly, their own faces etched with the same desperation that drove William to seek a mail-order bride. Everyone knew the story by now. News traveled fast in small communities, especially news as scandalous as the hermit Hayes finally seeking female companionship. Cedar Junction came into view like a mirage, its collection of weathered buildings shimmering in the afternoon heat. The town had seen better days, but it remained the hub of commerce and gossip for 50 miles in any direction. As William's wagon rolled down Main Street, curtains twitched in windows and conversation stopped mid-sentence. Mrs. Patterson from the general store emerged onto her porch, arms crossed and eyes bright with curiosity. The Murphy brothers lounged against the saloon wall, sharing a bottle and crude jokes about William's prospects. Even Reverend Thomas appeared, Bible in hand, as if William's matrimonial venture required divine intervention. The train station buzzed with unusual activity. Half the town seemed to have found urgent business that coincidentally required their presence during the afternoon train's arrival. William felt their stares like needles as he tied his horses and stepped onto the wooden platform. The weight of their judgment pressed down on his shoulders. But he stood straight, jaw set with determination. The train's whistle echoed across the plains, mournful and distant. Black smoke appeared on the horizon, growing larger as the iron beast approached. William's heart hammered against his ribs as he tried to imagine the woman who would emerge. Plain, practical, sturdy. Those were the words he had used in his advertisement. Someone who wouldn't stir his buried emotions or remind him of dreams he could no longer afford. The locomotive roared into the station with a symphony of steam and squealing brakes, its arrival marking the end of William's solitary existence and the beginning of something he couldn't yet name. Passengers began disembarking, a traveling salesman with worn cases, a family heading west with hope in their eyes, an elderly woman clutching a carpet bag like a lifeline. William scanned each face, searching for the unremarkable woman he had requested. His pulse quickened with each passing moment. What if she had changed her mind? What if the agency had made a mistake? Then she appeared in the doorway of the passenger car, and William's world tilted on its axis. The woman who stepped gracefully onto the platform possessed the kind of beauty that poets struggled to capture and men fought wars over. Her auburn hair caught the afternoon sunlight like spun copper, swept elegantly beneath a modest traveling hat. Her dress, though simple in cut and color, could not disguise the graceful curve of her figure or the dignity with which she carried herself. But it was her face that struck William like a physical blow. Delicate features arranged in perfect harmony, skin like porcelain touched with rose, and eyes the color of emeralds that seemed to hold depths of intelligence and strength. This was no plain woman seeking practical arrangement, this was beauty incarnate. The very thing he had specifically asked to avoid. A collective gasp rose from the gathered crowd. Someone whispered, "Sweet Mother of God." Another voice hissed, "That can't be her." But when the woman's gaze swept across the platform and settled on William with unmistakable recognition, his worst fears materialized. "Mr. Hayes?" Her voice carried the clear, musical quality of mountain water over stones. "I am Catherine Morgan." William managed a stiff nod, his tongue suddenly thick and useless. He reached for her single trunk, their fingers brushing during the exchange. The contact sent lightning through his veins, awakening feelings he had sworn to keep buried. The crowd's whispers rose like buzzing wasps, speculation and judgment thick in the air. "She must be running from something," Mrs. Patterson declared loudly enough for all to hear. "No woman that beautiful comes to a place like this by choice." Catherine lifted her chin slightly, her composure unbroken despite the cruel words. She walked beside William with perfect dignity as he loaded her trunk, the crowd following at a respectful distance like vultures circling prey. When he helped her onto the wagon seat, his hands shook where they touched hers. As they drove away from the station, gossip erupted behind them like wildfire. William stole glances at his unexpected bride, noting the way she held herself with quiet strength, the slight tension in her jaw, the careful way she kept her hands folded. Whatever had brought her west, it wasn't the romantic notion of frontier adventure. The journey home passed in uncomfortable silence, broken only by the creak of wagon wheels and the occasional cry of a hawk circling overhead. William found himself hyper-aware of Catherine's presence beside him, the faint scent of lavender from her hair, the way afternoon light played across her profile, the mystery of what had driven such a woman to answer his advertisement. When they crested the final hill, his ranch spread before them in all its drought-stricken reality. The house stood weathered and lonely against the vast sky, surrounded by barren fields and the skeletal remains of what had once been a thriving operation. William waited for disappointment to cross Catherine's features, for the reality of her situation to sink in. Instead, she studied the scene with calculating eyes. "The land has good bones," she said quietly. "It's sleeping, not dead." Her words caught him off guard. Most visitors saw only failure and desolation, but Catherine seemed to see possibility. It made her even more dangerous to his carefully guarded heart. He carried her trunk into the small side room that had once been Sarah's sewing space, now hastily cleaned and prepared. "It's not much," he said, suddenly ashamed of the room's simplicity. "But it's private. It will suffice," Catherine replied, running her fingers over the quilt he had awkwardly arranged on the narrow bed. "Where might I find water for washing?" William showed her the stubborn well pump, demonstrated the temperamental mechanism that required both strength and patience. She listened intently, asked practical questions about the chickens, examined the failed garden with keen interest. Her questions revealed knowledge of farming that surprised him. This was no city belle playing at frontier life. That evening, Catherine moved through his kitchen with confident efficiency, her hands finding utensils and supplies as if she belonged there. Soon, the aroma of fresh bread and hearty stew filled the modest room. The first home-cooked meal William had enjoyed in months. Over supper, he forced himself to address the elephant between them. "We should establish clear boundaries," he began awkwardly. "This is a practical arrangement. Nothing more. You'll have your room, I'll have mine. We'll share the work and responsibilities. But I won't expect other duties." Catherine set down her spoon, meeting his gaze directly. "That arrangement suits me perfectly. Mr. Hayes, I didn't come here seeking romance or tender feelings. I came seeking security and honest work." Relief should have flooded through him. Instead, a strange disappointment settled in his chest. He had gotten exactly what he claimed to want, a business partnership disguised as marriage. So why did her easy acceptance feel like rejection? Days melted into weeks as William and Catherine established their strange partnership. She rose before dawn to start fires and prepare breakfast while he tended the failing cattle. They worked in careful parallel, sharing space but maintaining the emotional distance their agreement demanded. Catherine proved herself far from the delicate flower her beauty suggested. She hauled water buckets that would challenge most men, scrubbed floors until they gleamed, and coaxed edible meals from their dwindling supplies. Her hands, once soft and pale, grew calloused from honest labor. But she never complained. The drought continued its merciless assault. The well began producing muddy water, forcing longer trips to the creek. Cattle grew thinner, their ribs showing starkly through dull coats. Coyotes howled closer each night, drawn by desperation and easy prey. When William found wolf tracks near the pasture, larger and more dangerous than anything they had faced, he shared the news over dinner. "We'll need to take watches," he said grimly. "These aren't scavenging coyotes." Catherine's response shocked him. "I can handle a watch. I brought my rifle." "You can shoot?" William's skepticism must have shown in his voice. "My father believed a woman should be able to protect herself." Catherine replied calmly, "I'm quite competent with firearms." That night, William woke to the sound of gunfire. He rushed outside to find Catherine on the porch, rifle steady in her hands. A large gray wolf lying motionless 20 yards away. Her shot had been clean, professional, deadly accurate. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" he asked, studying her composed face in the moonlight. "When you have something worth protecting," she replied quietly, "you learn whatever skills are necessary." The simple statement revealed depths he hadn't suspected. Catherine wasn't just beautiful and practical. She was dangerous when threatened, a combination that stirred feelings William had promised himself to avoid. Later, when the well finally ran dry, Catherine insisted they dig near a cluster of cottonwood trees on the far edge of his property. "Trees don't survive without water," she explained when he questioned her logic. "There's moisture down there, deeper than you've looked." They dug together in the punishing heat, their clothes soaked with sweat, their hands blistered from unaccustomed tools. William called it foolish, but desperation left no room for pride. When damp earth finally appeared at the bottom of their pit, followed by the slow seep of precious water, he stared at Catherine with new understanding. "How did you know?" he asked. "Sometimes you have to listen to what the land is telling you," she replied, wiping dirt from her face with the back of her hand. In that moment, covered in dust and sweat, she had never looked more beautiful to William Hayes. The discovery of water marked a turning point in more ways than one. As they sat on the edge of their makeshift well, sharing a dipper of the precious liquid, something shifted between them. The careful distance they had maintained began to feel artificial, forced. That evening, a rare summer storm broke across the plains with spectacular fury. Rain hammered the roof in torrents while lightning split the sky in brilliant displays. Catherine rushed outside, arms spread wide, her face turned up to receive the life-giving moisture they had prayed for. William called for her to come inside, but she spun in the downpour, laughing with pure joy. Her hair streamed like copper silk, her dress molded to her figure, and her laughter rang like church bells across the prairie. When lightning cracked too close, she finally ran for shelter. Breathless and radiant, he wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, his hands lingering longer than necessary. She looked up at him, raindrops clinging to her lashes like diamonds, and the space between them seemed to crackle with more than storm energy. "William," she whispered, and his name on her lips sounded like a prayer. For one breathless moment, he almost kissed her, almost let himself fall into the green depths of her eyes and forget every promise he had made to keep his heart locked away. Instead, he stepped back, the movement as painful as tearing away part of himself. "I should explain why I came," Catherine said softly. Her story emerged like water from a broken dam. Her father's gambling debts, the wealthy man who had claimed her as payment, the cruel bargain struck without her knowledge or consent. She had fled on her wedding morning, using her mother's jewelry to buy train passage west, desperate to escape being treated like property. William's hands clenched into fists as she spoke. He had asked for a plain woman to avoid the complications beauty brought. But Catherine's beauty had made her a target, a prize to be won rather than a person to be cherished. "I thought you would be different," she said, her voice barely audible above the storm. "A man who wanted plain wouldn't see me as an ornament or possession." "You're not safe here," William said roughly. "Not from the dangers that follow beauty. And not from me. Not anymore. Yet I feel safer with you than I ever have," she replied, her eyes meeting his with devastating honesty. The admission hung between them like a bridge neither dared cross. William's carefully constructed walls crumbled a little more, and he realized that perhaps some prisons were meant to be escaped. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the small farmhouse, two hearts began the dangerous dance of falling in love despite every rational reason not to. Morning brought an ominous stillness, as if the prairie itself held its breath in anticipation. William was reinforcing the chicken coop when the thunder of approaching hooves shattered the peace. A lone rider appeared on the horizon, mounted on a magnificent black stallion that spoke of wealth and power. The man who dismounted at William's gate wore expensive clothes and the bearing of someone accustomed to getting his way. His cold eyes surveyed the modest homestead with obvious disdain before settling on William with predatory interest. "You must be Hayes," the stranger said, his voice smooth as silk and twice as dangerous. "I'm Richard Blackwood. I believe you have something that belongs to me." Before William could respond, the kitchen door opened. Catherine appeared with a basket of eggs, her face draining of color when she saw their visitor. The basket slipped from nerveless fingers, eggs shattering against the hard-packed earth. "Hello, Catherine," Blackwood said, lighting an expensive cigar with deliberate calm. "You've led me quite a chase." "My dear, you have no right to be here," Catherine said, her voice trembling but defiant. Blackwood smiled like a shark scenting blood. "Oh, but I do." He produced a folded document from his coat. "Your father's debts totaled $25,000. I cleared them in exchange for your hand in marriage. The contract is legally binding." William stepped between them, his jaw set like granite. "She's my wife now. Any claim you had is void." "Wife?" Blackwood's laugh was sharp and mocking. "I've checked the records, Hayes. No marriage certificate filed, no church ceremony performed. You're living in sin with my property." The word property ignited William's rage. His fist connected with Blackwood's jaw before conscious thought could stop him. The wealthy man staggered backward, blood trickling from his split lip, but his smile only grew more menacing. "That was unwise, Hayes," Blackwood said, dabbing at the blood with a silk handkerchief. "I'll return tomorrow with the sheriff and a court order. Catherine will come with me then." Willing or not, he remounted his stallion with practiced ease. "Enjoy your last night together," he called over his shoulder before riding away, leaving threats hanging in the air like storm clouds. Catherine sank to her knees, her composure finally cracking. "You don't understand what he's capable of," she whispered. "He'll destroy everything and everyone to get what he wants." William pulled her close, his arms forming a protective circle around her trembling form. "Let him try," he said quietly. "I won't let him take you." But as they stood there in the fading light, both knew that Blackwood had the law on his side, and morning would bring a reckoning that could tear apart everything they had begun to build together. True to his word, Blackwood returned the next day with Sheriff Morrison, Judge Whitman, and what seemed like half the county watching from a safe distance. The wealthy man flourished his contract like a weapon, demanding Catherine's immediate return to fulfill her father's debt. "The law is clear," Judge Whitman said reluctantly. "The contract appears valid, and without proof of legal marriage." "Then let's make it legal," interrupted Reverend Thomas, stepping forward with an open Bible. "I can perform the ceremony right here, right now." William looked at Catherine, seeing fear and hope warring in her green eyes. "Will you marry me?" he asked simply, "not for the contract or the law, but because I love you?" Tears spilled down her cheeks as she nodded. "Yes, William Hayes, I'll marry you because I love you too." Blackwood's face purpled with rage. "This is preposterous. You can't." "I can and I will," the Reverend declared firmly, "unless you have legal grounds to prevent a willing bride from marrying the man of her choice." The impromptu ceremony took place under the vast Colorado sky, with the entire community as witnesses. When Reverend Thomas pronounced them husband and wife, William kissed Catherine with all the passion he had been holding back, sealing their union with love rather than mere convenience. Blackwood stood silent during the ceremony, his fury evident but impotent. As the newly married couple faced him, now legally protected by their union, his last card was played. "This isn't over," he snarled. "I'll find other ways." "No, you won't," Sheriff Morrison interrupted, his hand resting on his gun. "I've received some interesting telegrams about your business practices, Mr. Blackwood. Seems there are warrants out for you in 3 states. I suggest you leave town before I decide to act on them." Blackwood's face went white. Without another word, he mounted his horse and rode away, disappearing into the horizon like the bad dream he had always been. That evening, as the celebration finally wound down and they found themselves alone, William and Catherine stood on their porch watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. I spent 3 years believing I had nothing left to lose, William said softly. But then you came, and I realized I was wrong. I had fear to lose, loneliness to lose, and losing them was worth everything. Catherine leaned into his embrace, feeling truly safe for the first time in years. I thought I was running from one prison to another, she replied. Instead, I found freedom in your arms. From that day forward, their ranch became a symbol of hope rather than despair. Catherine's touch brought life back to the land. Flowers bloomed in her garden, neighbors came to visit, and laughter once again echoed through the rooms where sorrow had reigned. The man who had prayed for a plain bride had instead found the woman who saved his soul. Not what he wanted, but exactly what he needed. And in the vast wilderness of the Colorado Plains, two hearts found their way home to each other, proving that sometimes the most unexpected gifts are the ones that change everything. Their love story became legend in Cedar Junction, told and retold around winter fires. The tale of a broken man who asked for practicality and received a miracle instead.